live in an age of unprecedented progress. Science fiction is becoming reality. In the next 10 years, things are going to change so quickly that the world in which we live, work, and play will be fundamentally transformed. Yet, the vast majority are not prepared for this. Now, we have all heard about innovation. It's the in vogue buzzword at the moment. But innovation is fundamentally underpinned by rapid progress in science and technology. Now, we believe that one of the most powerful tools that you can have for the future is an understanding of how quickly things are changing and what that means not just for individuals, but for humanity in general. We're now capable of harnessing some of the most powerful forces in the universe. And, as all good Marvel geeks know, with great power comes great responsibility. And once we understand this, we can act more wisely both as a society and in our own lives. That's why Gus and I started Future Crunch. It was to educate and create a debate about our common future. We believe that science and technology can make the place better for humanity. We believe that the future is going to be more transparent, more abundant, and more peaceful. But even if you disagree, perhaps many of you think that these changes are having negative consequences. Well, then as Sun Tzu said, know thy enemy. Regardless of what side of the issue that you're on, we believe that the role of science and technology needs to be in public debate.
Unfortunately, right now, that debate is almost non-existent because as a result of policies from both sides of the political aisle, Australia's science funding is at its lowest point in 30 years. So the CSIRO, one of the world's great national science research institutes, has lost 1 in 5 jobs in the last 2 years. Imagine your organization lost 20% of its workforce, and then imagine what the morale would be like if that had happened in the last 2 years. Australia, by some counts, the richest country in the world, now ranks 18th on the world's top 20 advanced economies in terms of the amount that it spends on research and development as a proportion of GDP. So that places it just ahead of the Slovak Republic and Greece, which we don't need to add, is currently broke. To us, an American and a South African, that just seems insane. Look around you. You live in a country whose prosperity is based on science and technology. And so what we need is a regulatory environment that's primed for the next 10 years of innovation, and not one that's designed to retain the last 100. We're not getting that from our leaders, from the people that are supposed to lead us from the front. So it's up to us, as corporate citizens, as people, as residents of this country, to really understand and to debate and to talk about these things. Because these are truly transformative times.
So we're going to take you on a little tour through some of the more exciting and cool things happening at the frontiers of science and technology. We don't want to stand up here and blow smoke up your ass and tell you that the future is going to be fantastic. What we do want to do, though, is make sure that the debate about the world that we're all going to be living in is clear, critical, and intelligent.
Before we get into that, though, we want to see what slides are working. All right. Okay. We've had a few technical issues with the slide. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go like that whenever I want the slide changed. And then if the technicians can help out to do that, that would be awesome. So, if you can just change to the next slide. Science and technology talk.
It's going to change the world.
They're always infamous because the technology never works. All right, that's the final slide. No, that's the second. Okay, can you change again, please?
Yes. Oh, butter.
All right, so we want to talk to you about butter before we get into it. The thing about butter is that butter used to be bad for you, right? For years and years, they told us it actually made you fat, it was bad for your heart. And then what happened is, by last year, enough evidence had accrued to show that, in fact, butter, and more specifically the saturated fats that it contained, could, in fact, be a part of a healthy diet, a balanced healthy diet. Now, it wasn't that butter changed. Butter was always like that. Butter was always a good part of your diet. It's just that the evidence about it changed. And when the evidence changes, people change their minds about matter.
And that's the beauty of the scientific method. Given one contrary piece of evidence, you have to rethink everything we thought before. It's the most powerful tool that we have to describe the world around us. As Carl Sagan said, science is just not a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking. So, Gus and I are good friends, and we love geeking out about science and technology. I'm a biologist, and I've had a love affair with biology for as long as I can remember. More specifically, I'm a bioinformatician, so I deal with big data in the biological realm. I do cancer research in Melbourne at Peter MacCullen Cancer Institute, Australia's biggest cancer research facility. And I'm looking at cancer biomarkers, little molecular signals of this disease, to improve diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment with those afflicted by cancer.
My background is environmental economics, and the subject I did my PhD in was looking at deforestation in developing countries like Zambia and Mozambique. But more recently, I moved into the technology field, and I'm now the manager of Australia's largest social hackathon called Random Hacks of Kindness. And what we do is we connect volunteer technologists, basically business people and people who can code with a conscience, and then we put them together with the charities and community groups, and then we bring them together to run hackathons to try and create open source solutions to some of the problems. So the two of us aren't exactly natural collaborators. We basically fight all the time about the intellectual content that we try to produce. So Tane really is a real scientist, I'm a social scientist. Or another way of thinking about it is that if we were in a boy band, I'd be the cool one. And he'd be like the geeky, dorky one, but socially awkward.
Except at a conference that's sponsored by the Cure Brain Cancer Foundation. I think I'm the cooler one here. I'll get all the groupies. So, what we do have in common, though, is a shared love and respect for science, technology, and rationality. We're not only positive, we are positivists. We're pragmatically optimistic about the future rather than frightened by it.
So let's show you what we mean by that. And to do that, we want to start by asking you a very simple question. And that question is, if you had to score humanity on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being that humanity sucks, and 10 being that we are awesome, what would that number be? In fact, what we'd like to ask you to do is to maybe show us on your hands what you think that number would be. And then we're going to take a photo, and like the little photo monkey over there.
Got a 5, a 4, a 3 over there, and a 2. All right, so it's a mixed bag.
Your answer to this really depends on where you're getting your information from. If you're getting it from where most people are, mainstream news sources, it might look a little bit like this. CNN's top 10 news stories of 2014. Number 1 on the list is, of course, the terrifying Ebola epidemic.
Followed by Malaysian airline flight 370.
Then there's the terrifying ISIS scourge in the Middle East.
Followed by the Ferguson shootings in the United States.
Then there's the Russian invasion of the Ukraine.
Celebrity deaths, such as that of Robin Williams.
Who could forget, of course, the ice bucket challenge?
Malaysian Airlines had a really bad year last year, Flight 17.
There was the Israeli invasion of the Gaza Strip.
And Boko Haram.
And an 11th story thrown in there for good measure, a terrifying combination of 2 of the top 3 stories, Ebola, the ISIS of biological agents. So it's not exactly very good news, is it? In fact, the best way of describing last year, according to the news, is as an apocalyptic highlights package, with a bit of celebrity news and a media sensation thrown in there. And yet, by almost any measure that you care to use, for the average human being on planet Earth today, the world is a better place than it has been at any point in human history.
In the last 200 years, life expectancy has more than doubled to a global average of over 70 years. In places like Australia and the US, it's now over 80 years. We're very close to eradicating the world's second ever global disease after smallpox, guinea worm. In the past 30 years, we've reduced the incidence of guinea worm by a factor of 28,000. The World Health Organization now views this disease effectively wiped off the face of the earth. 2013 marked a tipping point in the fight against AIDS, at which point more people received antiretroviral therapy than were being infected with AIDS. So we're going to see a continued decline in those being infected by AIDS. This really is the beginning of the end in our fight against this devastating disease. We're also winning on malaria, actually humanity's biggest killer. From 2000 to 2013, we reduced the global infection rate by 25%, and we halved the mortality rate.
As a result of treating these kinds of preventable diseases, more children are living to see their 5th birthday than ever before. In fact, The Economist says that we've saved the lives of 13.6 million children in the last decade. That's more people than have been killed by all forms of war and violence in that period. It means that last year, fewer parents, as a proportion of the world's population, had to bury their child than at any point in human history. We're also doing really well on extreme poverty. In the 19th century, between 80 and 90% of the planet lived in what we would classify today as extreme poverty. By the 1970s, that number was down to half, and in the last 20 years, it's more than halved again. So the world's population increased between 1990 and 2010 from 5.5 billion people to 7 billion people, yet the total number of people living in poverty decreased from 1.9 billion people to 1.2 billion people. In our opinion, that is the greatest economic news story of our time, and yet where do you hear it in the media? And the world's becoming better educated and more literate. In the 1970s, around half the planet could read and write. Today, that number is more than 4/5 that attend some form of schooling and who are literate. And most of the people who can't read and write are part of the older generation. So we're moving into a world where everyone is literate. And this is one of the most astonishing things we've seen in recent years. The longest period of time since the Roman Empire that two major world powers have not gone to war. So the hippies sang in the 1960s about world peace in our time. Well, we're closer to achieving that than we have been at any point in human history. And I often have to remind myself that in 1983, the year that I was born, racism was still legally mandated by the government in the country of my birth, South Africa. Aboriginal land rights weren't recognised here in the state of New South Wales. Homosexuality was illegal in the state of Victoria. And in some parts of the world, like Switzerland and Liechtenstein and Namibia, women still weren't allowed to vote when I was born. So we've made huge strides forward as a more compassionate, more caring, more global species in my own lifetime.
Why is it that we have such a negative view of a world that by almost all accounts is improving? The answer lies in our biology. So, inside my brain, inside all of your brains, is a series of connections and synapses that are hardwired for threat detection. They center around an area known as the amygdala. It's old evolutionary programming, but while it's old, it's incredibly powerful. When you see something that's truly scary or threatening, it overrides all other higher functioning parts of your brain. This is known as the amygdala hijack. Now, another term for this is the car crash effect, our tendency to gawk, stare, and discuss at things that are potentially dangerous or scary. Now, if you're looking out for tigers in bushes, this is pretty useful. Your ability to identify threats will increase your chances of passing on your genes. But in today's world, it's simply not as necessary. The chances of getting attacked by a wild animal are so small as to be effectively zero. Unfortunately, though, the media knows this. They know that we're hardwired to react to the dramatic and negative. They know fear is captivating, and they use it to sell us stuff. Media studies show that bad news outweighs good by a factor of 20 to 1. Take Ebola, for example. Unfortunately, it killed 7,400 people last year. There was another terrifying killer in the background that killed the same amount: doctors' bad handwriting. The media hand-selects stories that know captivate you, and they use it to up their ratings. Now, we all know that sex sells. That's why Gus and I launched a nude fireman calendar. It's not exactly flying off the shelves. Our girlfriends bought one, and we're pretty popular in the gay community in Melbourne. So sex sells, but so does bad news. And we're being fed a steady diet of bad news to up ratings, and it's really distorting our view of the way the world truly is. Now, in the past few decades, media has gone truly global. And coupled with social media, that means we're not getting bad news just from our friends and our neighbors and our cities, but from all over the globe. And this is truly distorting our view of the way the world truly is.
Now, we just want to be clear here, before we kind of go on any further, we're not standing up here today and suggesting that the world is a perfect place. I mean, we still have huge fights on our hands. Racism, homophobia, sexism. Those are things that aren't going to go away on their own. They're things we need to continue to fight. And we have incredible challenges, in particular around the environment. And climate change is the biggest challenge humanity has ever faced. And economic inequality, the OECD is now saying, is the single biggest issue facing us in economic terms. However, it's often easy to be cynical about the world all the time, to say that nothing's ever getting better. And the problem with cynicism is that it leads to apathy. And apathy doesn't get anything done. And so, choosing to be optimistic, first of all, you have the facts on your side. But secondly, our successes in the past should really give us confidence as a species moving forward into the future to overcome these new challenges.
Audio Jungle.
So what type of world are we moving into? As a result of science and technology, the rate at which things are changing all around us is increasing at an incredible rate. So, management professors love this type of thing. They call it disruptive innovation. It's the idea that successive waves of innovation come along and swamp entire industries. If you're writing for Harvard Business Review, they just can't get enough of this stuff.
Unfortunately, that's not quite right. In fact, disruptive innovation is one of the most misunderstood terms out there because new technologies that come along don't come along and wash away everything that came before. Instead, what happens is that new technologies come along and they get stacked on top of everything else that's come before. And at any given point, you still have access to all the old technologies that still existed. And so it's this complex mix. And so a more appropriate metaphor might be a complex multidimensional landscape and a cross-section through sedimentary rock. Now, that landscape is really, it's quite difficult to figure out where the next big thing is coming from. And it means that rates of technological progress are unevenly distributed. And so we get these strange situations, for example, where we're using a 21st century technology like the mobile phone while driving around in our internal combustion engines, which is a technology from the 19th century. And it's not just that rates of technological progress are unevenly distributed, it's also that access to technology is unevenly distributed. So, the washing machine was invented 70 years ago and changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And yet billions of people around the world still wash their clothes by hand. So a truly disruptive innovation, a truly disruptive technology, is something that makes products and services available to a portion of the population that previously didn't have access to that. And if you're trying to create disruptive innovation, it's about trying to create value that's greater than the value that you capture as the innovator. That's really good disruptive innovation.
If you zoom out far enough, technology in the long run grows exponentially. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts off small and slow, but quickly gains in size and speed, and sometimes triggers an avalanche. This is crucial because our brains evolved to think local and linear. Let me give you an example. If I take 30 linear steps, each a meter, I end up 30 meters away. If I take 30 exponential steps, each doubling in distance, then in 30 steps, I end up 1 billion meters away, or I've orbited the Earth 12 times. Now, exponential growth is easy to underestimate, and we often do. Our ancestors evolved in a world that was local and linear. Things in our forebears' lives were generally within a few days' walking distance, and calculating where a tiger's going to pounce is a linear function. So we're left with these evolutionary hangovers that leave us ill-equipped to deal with the current magnitude, the speed and scale at which things are changing all around us. This leads to a perception gap. It means, in the short term, we underestimate the power of technology. In the long term, we greatly underestimate it. This is known as Amara's Law, and it happens from everything from mobile phones to medicine.
You all heard of the knowledge economy, right? It was this idea that the person with the most knowledge wins. And so, an astronomer, for example, she could tell you more about the night sky, so she had an advantage over everybody else. But in today's world, you can download a platform or an app that tells you more about the night sky than she ever could. And so what really matters is whether you can convince someone to use to use your platform or your app, whether you can convince them to pay attention to it. This is the attention economy.
Take Kim Kardashian. Many people think she has a fantastic ass. But there are many asses out there, and I would argue some are much better. But regardless of what you think about her, in this new economy, she's a genius. Her ass gets more attention than some of the world's biggest political elections, and she makes millions and millions of dollars just by grabbing our attention.
The other thing to remember is that every time you direct your attention to an app or a platform or you download something, you're creating an information trail. And that information is incredibly valuable, which is why governments are trying to pass laws to wrestle control of it back, and why companies are really interested in trying to get it from them. And so one of the big challenges for us as citizens in the next decade is going to be to get control of that information back, because it's really valuable, and it belongs to us. However, as we've seen, that's going to be a very, very difficult fight.
Audio Jungle.
Those who gain your attention in this new economy win. So what does that mean for you? Well, if you can learn to create a good filter, distinguish the signal from the noise, then you win too. Because while everyone else is looking at Kim Kardashian's ass, you can be tapping into a high-quality, unprecedented stream of information from everything from privacy laws to astronomy. So pay attention. We're going to tell you about what we believe are some of the biggest trends, 5 big trends in science and technology that are really transforming humanity and making the world better.
First big thing that's going on, okay, is that for the first time ever, technology is selling to everyone. Now, that wasn't always the case. Technology used to be something that sold to big companies, more recently the middle classes. But in the last few years, it's become available to everyone there. You've all heard this many times, right? That's a picture of someone in Syria in Aleppo. This is a picture of a guard on the border of North Korea and China. And that's a picture of some Tanzanian porters halfway up Mount Kilimanjaro, and what they all have in common is that they are as addicted to their mobile phones as we are. As a result of this mobile phone revolution, we've seen more than 3 billion people come online in the last few decades. And 2 billion of those people are connecting to the internet via their smartphones. By the end of this decade, we're going to see about 4 billion people online. And all of them are going to be connecting to the internet via their smartphones. Now, this has been enabled by 2 main trends. The first you've all heard many, many times about. It's known as Moore's Law. It states that the computer processing power that we have doubles roughly once every 18 months. In practical terms, that means that the new iPhone 6 has 625 times more CPUs than my first ever computer in 1995, Pentium desktop. You're carrying a supercomputer in your pocket. Again, a line that you've heard many times. Now, Moore's Law is continuing unabated. At the beginning of this month, in August, IBM released results showing that they've made a 7 nanometer transistor chip. Currently, at the commercial level, we're using about 22 nanometer transistor chips. They're just about to release the next generation, which is 14, and about a year ago they got down to 10, but everyone said there's no way we're ever going to get to 7 because it's just so small, it's impossible. But at the beginning of the month, IBM said that they've pulled it off.
And it's not just processing power, it's also our memory. So, Intel released this around the same time. It's a new form of memory where they stack this technology on top of us, or on top of each other. So 3D computing is here. The memory is 1,000 times faster, has 1,000 times the endurance, and it's 10 times as dense.
Now, the other thing that's going on, this is something that's talked about less often actually in technology circles. And in some ways it's even more important. It's known as Cooper's Law. It states that the data, the amount of voice and data conversations you can have over a given area of radio bandwidth doubles roughly once every 2.5 years. In some way, the reason we think it's even more remarkable is that it's held true since the first ever radio transmission by Marconi back in 1895. Back then it was possible to conduct 40 simultaneous voice conversations on the surface of the planet. The effectiveness of our communications has improved by 1 trillion times since then. In practical terms, it means that we're now seeing things like the 4P9 smartphone from India. It's got a host of arrays and features the original iPhone didn't have. It's as powerful, and it costs $30. That means, in other words, to put this all in perspective, that within the next 6 to 7 years, we're going to see an extra 1 to 2 billion people coming online. And not only does that represent tens of trillions of dollars of new economic buying power, they've also got the equivalent to the iPhone 6 and more powerful at their fingertips. So it means they've got the networking power at their fingertips as well. And not only that, they're going to be connecting to the internet and using technologies in new ways too.
Currently, 50% of the world does not have access to any form of banking. That means half the world can't even get a loan for something as small as $10. People are overcoming this using technology. In places like Kenya and Tanzania, they've invented mobile payment systems where they can instantly transfer money. Now, this is incredible because only 3 years ago, 30% of the world had access to banks. So it's risen. 20% more of humanity now has access to traditional banking. Things like M-Pesa allow you to instantly transfer funds. I would venture to bet that no one in this room could instantly transfer funds electronically unless you're with the same bank. So 80% of Kenyans can. They're completely leapfrogging us and the centralized banking system.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
And things like Bitcoin and blockchain are going to revolutionize the way that we exchange value. So blockchain, the thing underlying Bitcoin, is a way for two individuals to exchange value without a third-party guarantor. So currently, our banks are third-party guarantors in the traditional financial system. Think of all the fees that they acquire. Think of how they slow down money to accrue interest. They make billions of dollars. And what are they actually doing? They're hardly doing anything, and they often mess it up. So with things like blockchain, you do it anonymously, and it goes into a public ledger, which is validated by the crowd. This is truly transformative technology. It's simply the most disruptive thing to happen to finance in more than 500 years.
Now, people look at things like blockchain, in particular in the banking industry, and I'm not trying to tar anyone with the brush here. I know that we've got some great corporate banking sponsors here. And ANZ, no doubt, is way ahead of the curve. But people look at these technologies, right? You say, oh, yeah, it sounds exciting, but it's kind of still clunky and slow. Don't really know how to use it. Can't really show my grandma how to use it. It feels a little bit unsafe. We're just going to let things hold off a little bit. I'm going to wait for it to become mature, and then we'll have a look at how it goes, right? They say, oh, it's immature. It's never really going to get there. It's just a little hobby horse for geeks and nerds. But remember, that's what the internet was like back in the 1990s. Anyone remember that? Anyone remember the sound? The internet in the 90s was slow, it was clunky, it was immature, the UX sucked. It wasn't really secure, so you wouldn't ever put your credit card details on there, and you couldn't explain it to your granny. And what happened was that in each of those cases, a company came along and solved that problem. So Google solved the problem of search and how to distribute information. Amazon came along and solved the problem of retail. PayPal came along and solved the problem of transactions. AOL solved the problem of accessibility, certainly in the early days. And what's going to happen with new technologies like Bitcoin and blockchain more generally is that companies are going to come along and solve the inherent problems with those things, and they are going to be the global giants of the future.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
At the same time that we're seeing disruptive ways in the way we're connecting and exchanging value, we're also seeing transformative change in the way we make things too. We're seeing a flattening of the manufacturing process, away from big corporations and into the hands of consumers and small companies. Rapid prototyping, or what's popularly known as 3D printing, is leading the charge. And at the commercial level, it's already a disruptive technology. They're using it in the aerospace industry to make specialized parts for engines to get us into space. It was a key technology to create the world's fastest car, the 1-1. They're even printing the classics now, like the body of the Shelby Cobra. 3D printing is being used in new ways all the time as well, unleashing totally new forms and mediums of creativity. In the medical industry, they're using it to create specialized organs for doctors to practice surgery on. They're using it to print more effective drugs, and they're even printing scaffolding, upon which you can grow organs from stem cells for replacement. Now, Japanese scientists are pretty close to printing full organs. It's called bioprinting, and they use a combination of stem cells, proteins, and other synthetic compounds similar to collagen. Now, if they pull this off, it would have huge ramifications for organ transplants. This is actually a urethra. They're now using it to print electronic circuits. They've developed a process called laser sintering, where you print powdered metal and fuse it with lasers, getting down to precision at the micro level. Since the beginning of the year, they've printed over 30 objects in space. Now imagine if a disaster like Apollo 13 happened today. Well, engineers on the ground could develop the tool or the part that you need, beam it up, and they could print it in space. This will be a key technology for our continued exploration of the final frontier. Now, last year in April, we were really excited about this pretty ugly house. But the cool thing that they did was they printed 10 of these in 24 hours using only recycled material, and they only cost $4,500. In Amsterdam, they've created new printing, free-form printing, basically printing in the air. Now, for these cool multi-access printers, their first project is going to try and be to print a bridge over a canal in Amsterdam. Awesomely, these printers print the own track that they autonomously move along on. So it will be done, hopefully, without any human help. Now, earlier this year, a company came out called Carbon 3D, which invented a totally new form of 3D printing. So using ultraviolet light, now objects can arise from liquid pools of metal and plastic. The T-1000 in Terminator 2 was actually the inspiration for this type of printing. However, most importantly, it sped the process up by 100-fold. And because it's not adding successive layers of material, it's also increased the strength and the heat resistance. This is truly game-changing. A week ago, Google led a Series C investment for $100 billion in this company, and Ford has also partnered for them to help make parts for their automobiles.
Now, if you want to think about disruptive innovation and about how these things could change, or how 3D printing could change the world, think about the way that most consumer products are currently made. Raw materials are shipped from every corner of the globe to a centralized location, say in China, and then they're assembled using specialized technologies at each stage of the process by specialized workers with specialized skills. Then the product is packaged together and then sent to you by a number of intermediaries, and it arrives here in Australia, usually a few days later. The thing about 3D printing is it has the potential to strip out every single node in that supply chain. And so you go straight from raw materials to one or two service providers who help you print it out, and then you get the finalized product. Think about the disruption that it creates in the global sweatshop industry, terrible working conditions, people like in Bangladesh, like this workshop that collapsed last year. Think about what that means for the global container ship industry and its accompanying carbon emissions and oil spills. And one of our favorite things, more wasteful manufacturing processes, because you only use the materials you need, and any materials that are left over you can incorporate into the next print run. Of course, raises a whole raft of new issues around IP, copyright, sharing, new types of supply chain for raw materials. If you think that the battles around musical piracy have been big, wait until we get into a world where you can now take a photograph of an object and scan it in 3D, and then you can use your handheld spectrometer to analyze it at the molecular level, knowing exactly what it's made on. Now you have the full specs for any product that you want. You can go down to your local 3D printing shop on the black market, and you can create a knockoff that works just as well as the original. Then we're really talking about piracy. And if you are a patent lawyer, you're going to have a lot of work.
Audio Jungle.
Let's talk about something we are particularly passionate about. Renewable energy. Now, not much good news here in Australia, I'm afraid, as I'm sure you're all well aware. But on the global scale, it's completely different. Renewables are starting to take off, really being led by solar. As I like to say, solar is the new sexy.
Says it all the time. Solar, when people think about solar technology, they think it looks like those big, fat, ugly solar panels. But we're already up to the third generation of solar cells, which allow you to bend them onto uneven surfaces and to stack them into layers. and that the efficiency has increased to around 30%. And right around the corner, we're looking at the 4th and 5th generation of solar cells, which allow you to literally paint solar onto the roof, and like these researchers at the University of Michigan have done, install solar into clear glass. And what that does is it works by exciting the electrons at the corner of that glass. If you want to think about disruption on a mass scale, imagine that in a city like Sydney, every single mobile phone screen, every windshield, and every piece of glass in the building is an energy generating cell. Then, if that happens, we're now talking about disruption on a mass scale, which will make energy clean, cheap, abundant, and ubiquitous. And we're looking at those kinds of technologies coming online at least within the next 10 or 15 years. Now, energy experts, in particular fossil fuel advocates, will tell you, yeah, this is never going to happen. Solar and other renewables, they only account for about 1% of total world power generation. We're not going to see any changes anytime soon. But what they forget is that solar, like the other things we've talked about here, is an exponential technology. And it obeys its own exponential technology law known as the Swanson effect, which states that for every doubling of global solar capacity, the price comes down by 20%. That's held true since the 70s. If you want to see what this kind of disruption looks like, and the way that most people think about this in a local and linear way, these are the International Energy Agency's projections for the deployment of solar and other renewables globally every year. So in 2006, they started releasing their projections, and you can see that every year they keep on having to revise it upwards. So in 2006, they thought it was going to take until 2020s to get to where we are today already with wind, and they thought it was going to take until the 2030s to get to where we are today already with global solar. Now, their current best prediction, as of 2014, is that solar energy will be the dominant energy form on the planet by 2050. So, how many times are they going to revise that estimate downwards in the next decade? The other thing that experts will tell you is that it's great for when the sun's shining, but what happens when you need baseload power? That, however, doesn't take into account, of course, the advent of battery technologies. In November last year, this was the state-of-the-art battery system. Right? It could get you around 10 kilowatt hours, and it cost about 20 grand. And it looked kind of nice. I mean, I could probably deal with having that in my garage. But in May this year, as most of you know, Tesla announced the Powerwall. So, same capacity, same power as that last battery system you saw, but a quarter of the price. And the way to really think about this is like the first iPhone. So the first iPhone on its own didn't create the mobile revolution, but it acted as the price signal to all the other companies to say, consumers are ready for this product, they want it, and this is something that you can make money from. So a host of other companies are going to follow in Tesla's wake. And we're going to see the Powerwall 1, the Powerwall 2, the Powerwall 3. And as that happens, we're going to see the fossil fuel industry decimated. Now, if you want to see what this kind of looks like, the newspaper industry is a great example. What's really interesting is that the technology that kills it, the internet, is invented back there in the 1980s. But Amara's law holds true. People look at the technology and they get really excited about it initially, so they overestimate it in the short term. But then they see no reason to change what is very obviously a successful business model. In the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, newspapers experienced record growth in profits. Their business model was great. It was obviously working. In the 2000s, some of them start going, whoa, hold on, what's going on? And then in 2006, the sector goes into freefall. Incidentally, 2006 is when Twitter is launched. So it, along with a number of other social media platforms, means that people are no longer reliant on newspapers for their news anymore. And that changes so quickly. In 2011, 10% of US adults said they got most of their news from Facebook. Today, that number is 40%. Now, the fossil fuels industry is in the same place that the newspaper industry was in about a decade ago. Some of the more enlightened executives know they need to change, but the vast majority are like rabbits caught in the headlights, and they're about to get run over. Which is great, right? Because it's high time we stopped using the 19th century technology involving digging black rocks and dinosaur juice out of the ground and burning it in order to power the 21st century.
Gus and I like to finish things off by getting personal. So let's talk about what matters most, how we take care of our bodies.
Audio Jungle.
I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Human Genome Project. In the 1990s, when it took off, it was the most ambitious and expensive scientific project ever undertaken. Well, I crunch human genetic data every day in my job. The first one took 13 years and $3.4 billion to complete. Now, on a chip the size of a stick of gum, we can fit 5 human genomes. Really the recipe that creates you from the molecular level up. On this chip, it takes around $1,500 each and is done in about 9 days. That's exponential growth. Now, the current project of this sort of magnitude is reverse engineering the human brain, the organ that sets us apart and makes us unique in this world of life. Countries led by the US and Europe are using supercomputers in an attempt to map every single synapse and connection and try and figure out the way our brain works. If they pull this off, it will have huge and profound implications on our understanding and treatment of neurological and psychological disease, allow us for brain-machine interfacing, and spill it over into other technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. Moving from the brain to the body, in the future, you will be monitored 24 hours a day by a multitude of arrays and sensors. They'll be looking at a variety of different biomarkers and molecular signs of your health. Now, they're not going to be on your wrist or in your clothing or in your glasses, but they'll be underneath your skin and in your bloodstream. Now, this kind of monitoring seems a bit strange and crazy, but we already implement it in many other fields. Take airlines, for example. In the current Boeing engine, there are over 100 sensors. So, if a signal is sent off that something is wrong, the plane is grounded and it's fixed before it falls out of the sky. Why wouldn't we do that for ourselves? So a lot of these technologies, what's going to underpin it is nanotechnology. In the future, nanotechnology is going to be your friend. Now, what is nanotechnology? It's the ability to create things at the atomic level with super precision. And that happens between 1 and 100 nanometers. Well, what does that mean? Gus was talking about a chip that's 7 nanometers. Well, let's put this into perspective. 1 nanometer next to a meter stick is the same as a blueberry next to the Earth. And we're already making stuff at this ridiculously small scale. The fantastic notion of a team of doctors and machines shrunk down so small that they could course through your arteries and fix all your ailments is a popular science fiction trope from the 1950s. We're well on our way. Scientists at the Institute of Science in Bangalore, India, have created artificial nanostructures that can swim through undiluted human blood. Scientists elsewhere have created micromotors that run on your stomach acid, and most importantly, they harmlessly decompose. Now, in my field of specialty, cancer research, they're using nanotechnology to deliver multiple cancer drugs directly to cancer cells. They use what's called DNA origami, which is a way they fold our code of life around multiple cancer drugs, and through a chemical equilibrium, deliver them directly to cancer cells. This precision is incredible, because our current therapies, like chemotherapy and radiation, poison the entire body, or large portions of it, to kill a relatively small population of cells. Right around the corner, there'll be nanobots in your bloodstream and in your digestive tract. They'll be able to intelligently scout out early signs of disease and pathogens, such as Alzheimer's and cancer, and deliver medication in very precise ways. They can scour your veins for all that plaque and get rid of all those nasty free radicals. Now, all of this information is going to be constantly streamed wirelessly to medical servers where it will be data mined. They're going to know you're having a heart attack before you do. If you're showing signs of a heart attack, you and your family will be notified, and a drone will be dispatched to keep you alive until the ambulance arrives. At the hospital, they can grow you new organs for transplant, such as a heart. Now, can you imagine what personalized organ growth is going to do to the organ enlargement industry? For less urgent cases, you'll have an automatically scheduled appointment with your doctor, who probably won't be a human anymore. They can prescribe you nutrition, supplements, and medication based on your specific genome. For really run-of-the-mill type things, such as a flu or infection, you'll be prescribed the digital medication, which you can download and print at home on your 3D printer. Sounds crazy, right? Well, the computer, as it's already called, was invented at the University of Glasgow, and they're scaling it up for use at home. Now, all of these technologies that we've talked about today are growing exponentially, and healthcare is no exception. But if healthcare is, then so is life expectancy. And we're already seeing that. A girl born today in Australia can expect to live for 85 years, and a boy for 84. This almost certainly underestimates what's going to happen in the future. A few small medical advances in their life of a girl or boy born today will easily have them outlive this century. Now, it's important to note that the 80-year-old of today is not going to be the 80-year-old in the future. 80 will be the new 50. We will be physically and aesthetically healthier throughout our entire lives. Now, this just blows my mind. On current linear trends, for every day that you live, you gain 6 hours extra of life expectancy. So that means, while Gus and I have been rambling along up here, you all have gained 15 minutes extra of life.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Let's kind of bring this part of the talk really to a close. And what we want to do here is what we do as Future Crunch, the reason we're so passionate about this stuff is that we want to start a conversation with people about this world that we're all going to be living in the future. And the problem in our mind is that right now, that conversation is dominated by people who push bad news at you, or it's dominated by people who are interested in technology because they want to sell it to you.
What we hope we convinced you of today is that the world is a much better place than you're being told it is. Things are changing faster than you think, and that we're even evolutionarily equipped to deal with. But knowledge is power, and this world is full of huge opportunity. Regardless of your disposition, your career, we believe that one of the most important tools that you can have for your future and to make this world a better place is to understand how quickly things are changing.